Good afternoon, everyone. So glad to see that everybody is having such a wonderful time, seeing old friends, making new friends. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. My name is Marissa Chun, and on behalf of the Board of Directors of the Public Policy Institute of California, it is my pleasure to welcome all of you to this program, part of our 2023 speaker series on California's future. We are delighted to present this special and historic event today featuring California's Chief Justice, the Honorable Patricia Guerrero. Chief Justice Guerrero was sworn into office at the beginning of this year, making history as the first Latina ever in California's history to serve as California's Chief Justice. In her first State of the Judiciary address, Chief Justice Guerrero highlighted her commitment to a more diverse and inclusive judiciary branch, as well as to the technology which critically preserved access to justice to Californians during the pandemic. Chief Justice Guerrero has also adopted the Power of Democracy Civics Learning Initiative and has been very active in the Judges in the Classroom Civics program, which engages schools and supports and encourages students to learn about the role of the judiciary in our constitutional democracy. Moderating today's conversation is PPIC's President and CEO, Tani Cantil-Sakauye. Now, as some of you know, Tani is uniquely familiar with the Chief Justice's position. For the 12 years prior to taking the helm at PPIC, Tani herself served as the Chief Justice of California Supreme Court, making her the first Asian Filipina American and only the second woman in our history to serve as Chief Justice. So I am sure we are all looking forward to this conversation between these trailblazing and incredibly influential women leaders. Now, this event is part of PPIC's 2023 speaker series on California's future. We would like to thank our sponsors of the series for their incredible support. Their underwriting support really makes possible for these events to be free and open to the public. These organizations are listed on the programs on the back on your tables. And before we begin, just a few items. Number one, as a public charity, PPIC does not take or support any positions on any ballot measures or legislation. PPIC also does not support, endorse, or oppose any political parties or candidates for public office. Second, at the end of our program, the Chief Justice Guerrero has been kind enough to agree to respond to some of your questions. For those of you who are joining us virtually, please send an email to ppiceventquestions@gmail.com. Please make sure that you include your name and organization along with your question. For those of you who are joining us here in Sacramento, we hope that you had an opportunity to submit your question in writing to the audience question stations outside in the foyer. If you have any additional questions, please feel free to email your questions at the email address on the screen. So PPI staff will be monitoring the questions, and we will be incorporating them as much as possible. And finally, if you haven't already done so, please do silence your cell phones. So without further ado, let me turn it over to Tani Cantil-Sakauye, PPIC's President and CEO, who will moderate today's program. Tani?
Thank you, Marissa. Marissa is a longtime board member of PPIC, and in her spare time, she is a judge of the San Francisco Superior Court. Thank you for that welcome. On behalf of PPIC, we welcome you, and I echo how fortunate we are to have the 29th Chief Justice of California, Patricia Guerrero, with us today. take it from me, her schedule and calendar are quite busy. And I'd like to say that her official title, as we know, is the Chief Justice of California. And she runs the largest law-trained judiciary in the United States with her Judicial Council. And she also carries a caseload equal to her 6 colleagues, the justices on the California Supreme Court. Her extensive bio is already on your tables or at our website, but I'd just like to mention that she is educated in California, her undergrad at Berkeley, her law degree from Stanford, and she has practiced extensively in both private and public sector and has served at all 3 levels of court. That is the Superior Court of San Diego, the 4th District Court of Appeal in San Diego, and also before she became Chief, an Associate Justice of the Supreme Court before she stood statewide election, won overwhelmingly, and became the 29th Chief Justice of California. And I'll only add that her remarkable career is rivaled only by her extensive volunteer and pro bono work in various disciplines throughout her career. Welcome, what a pleasure it is to have you.
Thank you so much, Chief Justice Cantil-Sakauye is what I will always refer to you as. It's such an honor and a privilege to be here with you. And before we begin the discussion, I just wanted to say how much we miss you and how nice it is to see you here in this different context.
Thank you, Chief. These days I'm Tani.
I don't know if I can get used to that, but okay.
Thank you again. We are we feel so fortunate to have you here.
Thank you.
I'll start off our questions by asking you, what would you say are the top issues facing the judiciary today?
Well, I started by saying how much we missed you, and part of that is how thankful I am to you and Martin and your whole team for facilitating the smooth transition of leadership. And also to thank PPIC for inviting me here today, and to Judge Chun for that kind introduction, and for having these speaker series I think are so important to talk to leaders throughout, not just the judicial branch, but other parts of our government as well. But focusing on the judicial branch, the transition has been, for me, quite eventful. I'm sure you remember how it was. It's pretty chaotic, and so I've been using this time to try to listen to other people's viewpoints, hear the areas of concern, and I've been meeting a lot of judges, justices, other stakeholders throughout the state, and again, trying to become informed, look at past practices, and identify areas where hopefully we can improve in the future. And some of the areas are the same ones that we have held true to and are always going to be a priority for us, and they will be also for my tenure with the court. And I think the first one is our number 1 goal of access, fairness, diversity, and inclusion, and ensuring that we maintain our focus on that issue. I think another issue that I didn't focus on quite as much, if at all, before was our budget, and how important it is to have adequate, sustainable funding for the judicial branch, and including sufficient resources with new judgeships. So that will always be a priority too. The third thing that I think of is the importance of preserving the public trust and confidence in the judiciary. And I think that now in particular, I hear from others, and we feel under attack. A lot of that I think is misdirected to the state judicial system. A lot of it influences, things that happen at the federal level influence how we're treated and the perception of justice. And so I think maintaining the independence of the judiciary is also a key focus for me. And also the access to justice, the justice gap, trying to identify ways to continue to help self-represented litigants, and that includes the self-help centers that we already have, but also I think renewing our commitment to encouraging the provision of pro bono legal services, I think is of critical importance. And so all of those, in addition to the new world where we're at now, using technology to make sure that that is a method of again, ensuring access to justice. And I view all of those themes as, and there are many more, but all of those themes as continuing the strong foundations that you established and that Chief Justice George established, holding my baton for the next generation, which are in this room too, of future leaders, and that includes building the pipeline of those future leaders. So I hope to hold this job in good stead for the next group.
I think you're off to a wonderful start. It is so wise of you to go on a listening tour, especially as we've entered, as you've already acknowledged, this new post-pandemic world that involves technology, but still some of our true North Star issues about access to justice. And so I know as you listen, we have a branch of smart lawyers and judges who are more than apt and ready to let you know about how to improve the branch. And you stand ready with an incredible team yourself. So we are really looking forward to that.
Thank you.
My next question is really a little bit more personal, and that has been said and acknowledged and celebrated here today. You are California's first Latina Chief Justice, in addition to being the first Latina to be an Associate Justice of the California Supreme Court. Can you tell us a little bit about that path and about how that path may have shaped your views about how you think about the law?
Yes, and I always preface it with saying I hate talking about myself, but I have learned that it's not about me, and it's more about my family and my story and my upbringing, and I think that resonates with so many people. And so for that reason, in that context, I'm happy to share. I'm just really a normal person. Growing up in the Imperial Valley, if you have heard of the Imperial Valley, some people haven't, but if you have, you hear all these bad things. You hear about the poverty, triple-digit heat comes to mind. You hear about the unemployment, illiteracy, bad pollution, and all of those things I didn't know, except maybe the heat. I did recognize the heat. But all the other things, what I remember is it being a source of pride and strength, and that is where I grew up, where my family came from Mexico and ended up in the Imperial Valley. For those who don't know, it borders Mexicali, the capital of Baja California. And my parents, when they came to this country, they grew up in poverty. We didn't have a lot of money, but nothing compared to the poverty that they grew up in. And so it was my grandfather who convinced my father at the age of 19 to come to the US, and he said, everything will be better, because he was happy, he wanted to stay. He said, everything will be better in the United States, and you'll have opportunities for your family that you wouldn't have here staying in Mexico. And I wish I could hug my grandfather now and tell him how right he was. And it was because of my parents' sacrifice, their struggles, their hard work, and I think the lessons that they taught us the importance of an education for your own independence, that it was something that nobody could ever take away from you, even though they didn't have a lot of education themselves. And they also emphasized, my mother in particular, the importance of helping other people. And so I saw that growing up through the work that she did. And so those lessons I take with me and apply now. And I think it just gives me a good perspective. I'm deeply grateful for the opportunities that I've been given in this unique role to have this platform to hopefully inspire future generations, other people like me, to know that it doesn't matter where you start out. Hard work, perseverance, opportunities, and helping others. And I think that those lessons also are applicable to my role as chief.
Thank you, and I know personally that you hate talking about yourself, but I think it's really important because we have in the audience young lawyers, college students, we have assembly fellows, judicial fellows, we have a lot of future leaders here. And
I met some of them earlier.
Exactly, that's why we need to hear the story so that they know and can identify and see that it's possible. And so I'm glad that you do something you don't like to do. Can you tell us a little bit about how your life has changed from being an associate justice to the chief?
Well, I was speaking with your husband, Mark, earlier today, and telling him, you probably remember well that this is a very, challenging, but I have really enjoyed the transition. the challenging in terms of managing all the different aspects that are involved in being chief. And as you know, there are 3 different roles that I have that I didn't have before. I, as you said, am one of 7 of the associate justices. I was one of the, there's 6 associate justices with the chief. You only have 1 vote though. The title doesn't matter. And so I still have to convince my colleagues whenever I can to sort of build consensus. And so that part of the work has not changed. But there are additional administrative responsibilities that come with being chief. Working with Jorge, who's been wonderful, the clerk of the court, and our team. And there are a lot of aspects involved, day-to-day ones that I won't bother or bore everyone with. But any day can be unpredictable, so that's always fun. And then in addition, being the chair of the Judicial Council. And I have the honor of working with the interim administrative director, Millicent Tidwell, who's been fabulous. So thank you for working with me during this transition period. And our new administrative director, Shelley Curran, who I'm so looking forward to working with you, and I know that she'll do a fabulous job. And that also is a larger group of people that I didn't have any direct interaction with before, but anyone here in the audience and watching virtually knows how much the Judicial Council, their work, impacts everything throughout the branch. And so you may not know everyone individually, but you should appreciate the good work that they do. And so I have that personal insight now working with all of them, and that's been just really such an honor. And including COJA hearings is another aspect of my, COJA is the confirmation of judicial appointments, and the Commission on Judicial Appointments. I work with Attorney General Bonta and the most senior presiding justice. My husband describes that as, this is like being an OBGYN. Everybody is happy. And so I do enjoy those. And the new judge orientations, there have been about 130 new judges who I've had the pleasure of welcoming to the branch. And in addition, working as an advocate for the judicial branch with our sister branches of government, and that also includes other outreach efforts. So one of the best things that I've enjoyed over these past very eventful 10 months is learning from, as I said, the judges, justices throughout the state, outreach efforts. I was at elementary school, high school, and continuation school earlier this week, and then at a Red Mass last night, and all of that is just such an honor to be able to do each of those 3 responsibilities. But in terms of the transition, there's still only a limited amount of time during the day. So as you know, it's difficult to manage all of those.
Thank you. Well, I hear you're doing wonderfully, and I know that the Judicial Council has a professional crack staff of about 800 folks or so, and you hear from every single one of them on a regular basis. And you also have your Judicial Council, approximately 31 you appoint of judges and lawyers who help you with the policy. And I would be remiss if I didn't recognize that of the 130 new judges, we have Luis Cespedes, the governor's judicial appointment secretary, here with Adam Hoffman, his deputy. That is a hard-working group of folks.
Yes.
Thank you. And so as you are running this organization of rulemaking and part of the Supreme Court and interfacing with the other 3 branches of government, and as you do this work and you go on the listening tour, what do you think is a vision for the judiciary emerging for you in terms of what you would like to accomplish as Chief Justice?
I think it will go back to the focus on equal access to justice and finding ways to help further the pursuit of that, including working with self-represented litigants, as I said. I think the things that I focus on tend to be the things in the Daily Journal or the news or things that are pointed out as issues of concern. What comes to mind as an example is the long-standing issue of court reporters and trying to ensure that we have a verbatim record for all of the parties who appear in our courts so that they can actually pursue a meaningful right to an appeal. And so that is a trickier issue than I think I appreciated, but looking for ways to explore having a verbatim record available to everybody. We have learned from the experiences during the pandemic and the good work that you initiated about the post-pandemic initiatives that we should be focusing on. Part of that includes utilizing remote access to technology, remote appearances, and so that continues to be a focus, working to extend, as we have, the deadlines for criminal and civil remote proceedings, I think is incredibly important, also an access to justice issue. And just continuing to explore ways to implement the new laws that have been passed. I think the mental health care courts is an important issue and will continue to be a priority for the courts, especially now as we're implementing that new law. And so similarly, we take all issues. So I think it's difficult. I was mentioning earlier, I wonder what my pandemic will be, my pandemic equivalent will be. I'm hopeful that it won't be a repeat of that or the Great Recession. But you never know. And so I think just ensuring that we have a strong foundation. I think the judicial branch under your leadership has weathered very significant storms. And I think that you positioned us well to continue to do that in the future. So whatever issues there are, I view them as opportunities. I view them as opportunities to continue to enhance equal access to justice for all Californians.
Thank you. I so admire your strong mindset, and it is true. I smile because it is media like the Recorder or the LA Times that actually bring to light some issues that eventually will definitely come your way. Yes. And speaking of that, I just want to say, to remind you that if you'd like to ask the chief a question, please fill out your card or send it to the email, so Stephen Bliss will be able to show me by hand raised a question to ask from you. I've already collected some of the questions from you as well, and we hope to get to those in a minute, so thank you. I'm going to ask you about the Supreme Court itself and its geographical diversity, which I think is a great thing, because the complaint had been against the Supreme Court for many years is, you're all from Northern California. So now the Chief Justice is in San Diego, 2 Associate Justices are in Los Angeles, and 4 Justices are in Northern California. How does that work?
It works well, and I would say I'm not saying that just because I'm a biased participant in the geographic makeup, but I will say that the pandemic again taught us that we can really work from anywhere, and so it doesn't matter where I start. Yes, I technically live in San Diego, but I'm really all over the place. And the justices in LA also have staff in LA. I would say that one thing it helps, and I can't emphasize this enough, is the assistance that we have from our research attorneys. So we have a wonderful, wonderful team of attorneys throughout. There's applause for that. I would echo that.
I see it. I see it. We know it. We know this.
We couldn't do our work without them, and so this is true throughout the branch. But I have a fabulous assistants in San Francisco. I also have wonderful attorneys in San Diego. The same is true in LA, and I think that that helps us, that we're able to utilize this talent throughout the state. And I recall your question reminds me of something that my youngest son loves that the governor said. And it was during the brief discussions that they were having with him at one of my swearing-ins, and it just stood out to him, and he said, Southern California doesn't just stop in LA. It extends to San Diego. And so I guess we've never had a Chief Justice who comes from San Diego, and I'm proud to represent the San Diego community because they are so helpful in where I'm at now. But you mentioned geographic diversity of the court, and so I'm happy that that allows us to work with people from throughout the state. But it's not the only measure of diversity, as you know, on our high court. And so one of the blessings, it's really like working with all of your heroes, to me, including you when I first joined the court. And that's how I think of our court. It's a rich diversity. When I meet with other Chief Justices throughout the country, I'm really proud of our state. I think it's the most diverse in measures of geographic diversity, as you mentioned, but race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, even age. I think that's okay to say, even age of the justices. And it's just a remarkable group that adds to the dialogues that we have. So I'm proud that we have geographic and diversity across the board.
Thank you. And I have to say, too, I look around the audience and I think that is so true of the appellate bench, as well as I see Sac Superior in here as well. So it really is an incredible work done by Governor Newsom, Governor Brown, and Governor Schwarzenegger. And I can only just say that because that's my time frame, my arc. But you're absolutely right, and it's a strength. In your State of the Judiciary in March, you talked about the importance of collaboration across all three branches of government. And I'm wondering whether or not you can tell us about some of the key areas or opportunities you see for this type of collaboration.
Yeah, thank you for that question. That is also a new facet of this job that I'm getting used to, and emphasizing and working collaboratively with our sister branches of government is so important to maintain a positive working relationship. It's critical to the work that we do. And so I'm mindful of that and trying to explore ways to continue to do that. As you know, we talk about three-branch solutions. I'm like, okay, I've heard this concept, three-branch solutions. Can't we just find our own solutions? But it doesn't work that way. And some examples of that, I would like to applaud the governor and the legislature for recognizing the importance of trying to work with people with mental health needs through the care courts. And so our responsibility in connection with that three-branch solution is critical, and we're doing that now. And so that's one example of the work that we're doing. I think the other is the remote access that I mentioned. We have negotiated with the legislature and working with the governor to expand that important ability to continue. We have about 6,000 everyday remote proceedings, and so we're learning really that it helps in so many ways, and so we're happy to be able to work with our sister branches of government on that as well. And there are things like the structure of the finances for ability to pay fines and fees were a big part, as Martin knows, of our revenue, and we lost that, so we have to find ways to make up for that. And so that's another three-branch solution to ensure that we can continue to do our work. And I think a big part of that too is the Bench Bar Coalition, which is established, and so many people have been involved to try to improve communication with the legislative branch. And I think also just individual relationships. And I was at an event last night, and one of the senators was there, and just that they know you, they respect, it's mutual respect that you're building. And so I think it's important for judges and justices to invite their local legislators so they can actually see the good work that the judicial branch does, and they can see how important it is for their constituents. And so I think when I think of, and when I made that comment, I think of all those areas that are important for us to continue building upon.
Thank you. That's a great answer, and I think that's very promising, and starting early is really, really wise. You mentioned Care Court. Can I ask you a little bit more about that? I know there are 7 counties across the state that launched Care Courts on October 1, and Los Angeles has volunteered to be an early adopter, which is very helpful. And we know that the new approach is to address the needs of some people who have significant mental health and substance abuse disorders. I know it just rolled out October 1st, so we're just fresh into it, but can you tell me what the vision for the branch of success for the Care Courts looks like?
Yes, well, a big shout out to the 7 counties that adopted it: Glen, Orange, Riverside, San Diego, San Francisco, Stanislaus, Tuolumne, and soon LA. So thank you. As you said, it's intended to identify how we can help intervene earlier on to really address the underlying issues that are of concern, and to provide resources that are much needed to people who are suffering from mental health issues and substance abuse disorders. We are fortunate to have the funding from the governor to allow us to implement the Care Court system. And it's really early on, so we're still using those funds wisely in the rollout. And the Judicial Council has implemented new rules. We've done webinars. We're doing fact sheets, all of that information to educate the public and educate the branch, training for judicial officers. And so I think it's still in the early stages, but we're hopeful to be able to implement it in a way that is intended to help people in their really important areas of need.
Thank you. Well, we're all excited, and I know that is exactly what you referred to earlier as one of those 3-branch solutions. Yes. I wanted to talk a little bit about something you already mentioned, and that is judicial independence. So nationally, I know the topic of judicial independence comes up pretty regularly amongst chief justices of the states, and also here in California with our judiciary and our system of regularly electing judges and justices. What does judicial independence mean to you, and should we, as a judiciary or a group of lawyers, be doing anything about it?
I think we all can do something about it. Judicial independence to me means the recognition that we are doing the best that we can based on the facts and the law that are presented to us, and explaining what we're doing, I think, is part of our responsibility as judges. We do not make decisions based on the popularity of issues, and as Justice Chin recently said, you don't put your finger in the air and wave it to see which way the wind is blowing to make a decision, and having the courage and conviction to do what's right, even if it's hard to do. And so judicial independence is critically important for our democracy. And I think part of it is, as I said, explaining our opinions in a way that the public can understand. They may not be happy, or at least one side is not happy with the decision, but they at least understand the logic and analysis and the reasoning behind it. And so I think that we should do that in a way that's understandable and transparent. And in terms of just again, the way that we rule in cases people need to understand and see that it doesn't matter what our own personal preferences are. It's based on the facts and the law, and just because the composition of the court changes doesn't mean the opinions then change suddenly. Mm-hmm. And I think also it's part of it is educating at an early age. And I think that's why I find it so important to talk to students at an early age about the 3 branches of government, and that we're an independent, co-equal branch of the government. And so I think that attorneys, judges, and all of us can be doing more in that area to ensure that we continue to maintain our independence.
Thank you. I wanted to ask you about a rather newish program at the Judicial Council that's sort of filling up, and that's the environmental program. Yes. And I know it aims to help the judiciary address issues in water or other areas of the environment, climate change, and helps to understand the legal questions. And I know, in fact, this summer the Judicial Council held its first environmental summit. So can you tell us a little bit about that and what you think are the emerging key water issues that are being studied?
Yes, again, going back to funding, we need funding for all of these things. And we have received, I think, $1 million from the general fund funding for that. And you mentioned this wonderful program. Justice Roby is here, and I think Justice Bulwer-Urey also was part of that, and so many others. It was a wonderful success. And climate change is such a, I guess a hot button topic, or whatever analogy you can use. But it's really incontrovertible, is what was referenced during this training program. But the implications of that are so far-reaching and widespread. And all of these issues work their way up to the courts. And they're incredibly complex issues. I mean, climate change we think of, we may have certain things in mind, but it's fascinating to hear how many components there are to it. So causation issues, liability issues, event attribution, is that the right saying? Source attribution, all of these different things basically about how climate change can influence issues that are in the court. They're as you said earlier, in one of your examples of a case that you had in 2006, I believe, where they brought it in grocery carts?
Shopping carts.
Shopping carts. And I think that, to me, reminds me of the complexities, because I did environmental litigation in private practice. But this is so much more, because as was mentioned during the training program, environmental litigation, for those who have practiced in the area, think of it in terms of the statutes. So you have the Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act, and CEQA is a big one. But there are all these emerging issues, common law, constitutional law issues of standing, And I could go on, takings issues, nuisance issues, tort issues, all of that wrapped up into climate change and its impacts. And so we're trying to ensure that the judges and justices have the training that they need to understand climate science and to be able to solve these difficult problems. I think we're, again, well positioned because although the issues are new and emerging, we have the strong foundation of our judicial branch to be able, with the good work of the judges and justices, to figure these complex issues out with adequate funding.
Thank you, Will. And at PPIC, we have, as you know, our water law center, our water center, and our water policy center. And we've been really grateful to partner with Justice Roby and Judge Bulwer-Urey on bringing that kind of information to the judicial officers because water litigation is deep, long, and extensive. Thank you for that answer. You also referred earlier a strong interest about bringing, talking to students about the courts and bringing courts, and we know, to the community, and you've done so through outreach programs and civic education. Can you tell us why that's important, and also what you and the court have learned from that kind of interaction?
Okay, well, as you know, I could go on forever on this topic, which was also, I think, close to your heart, too, in terms of the power of democracy and civics education. And I think of Justice McConnell when I say those words, too, because she's been instrumental in these efforts, as have so many others. And as an example of the interest in the branch, we had 140 requests just from Santa Clara and San Diego County in the month of September alone for judges in the classroom. And these are programs where teachers are able to invite judges and justices, now attorneys too, to come into the classroom and educate the students at an early age, K through 12, about, again, the three branches of government, always focused on the judicial branch. And I think that part alone is important, the education component of it. But in addition, I think it's equally important, if not more, maybe the personal interaction of meeting these young students and talking to them and letting them see and know and encouraging them to also follow their paths and passions. And it doesn't have to be being a judge or an attorney, but I think it helps for them to see so many of us out in the community and then to be able to see themselves in these positions too. And so for me, that's really the reason why it's so meaningful, and I get more out of it probably than they do.
I was going to ask about that. I know that as going through K through 12 and visiting the schools, and there's a lot of justices and judges involved in some of the power of democracy programs, and we get the bar associations involved also. I wonder if the judges and the lawyers come away with something as well. Do they learn also from that process?
Well, they have such great questions, and I do think they learn a lot from it. I come away just feeling hopeful for our future. And these, as an example, I visited recently the 3 schools who won the top award for excellence in civic education. I went to Fresno and I visited Maple Creek Elementary. And just recently I went to Anaheim and visited Gilbert and Dale Junior High. And one was a continuation school. Mm-hmm. They submitted the first time around, this has never happened before, their first submission came in at the top level and they got the award. And so there's students from all of these different paths. You come away from that experience appreciating really the challenges that these students are going through. I always like school, but they are in school, I think, in a different time, and it's so hard. And I think you come away with an appreciation for, it's impressive to see how poised, prepared, interested, engaged, active they are in their communities. And so I do think that we all benefit from the experience too.
I recall those are very, I think, warm community events as well, and the teachers and administrators work really hard at making that truly an inviting and great experience for everyone involved, and so it's
High
good to hear.
High school's a little harder. The elementary school students are a little easier.
Yes. You've already talked about technology in the courts. My question is, because with technology, the pushback has been about ensuring equal access. So I wanted to ask you, what's your vision for ensuring that component of technology that is equal access, and how does remote access fit into that?
I think that's a great question. It's so important to make sure that we're meeting everyone's needs and meeting them where they're at. And so when I think of the complexities associated with remote technology, well, I think, again, the pandemic helped us learn that we are nimble enough and can make the adjustment. And who would have envisioned that we would all be able to figure out even what Zoom is or how to work it, and now we all can. But it's challenging, I think, because not everyone is ready for that. And so I think it's important with remote technology to make it available. The justices are in person, as an example, in the Supreme Court, but we allow the attorneys to appear remotely. And that has efficiencies for them, which are important for their clients. And we also learned that in juvenile cases, and I think primarily in juvenile cases and family law cases, it's helpful to be able to participate remotely. That's what the younger generations are used to. It's sort of an equal playing field to have it on Zoom versus a large looming presence in the courtroom. And also for people who are pursuing restraining orders, they are able to appear for those requests without facing face-to-face the alleged perpetrator. And so there are all of these important benefits, we feel, from remote technology, but there's the digital divide as well. And I feel like I have a unique insight into that in my family. My kids who are in high school, they're always on their devices. And I think of my dad, he doesn't know what a smartphone is. And so I try to keep that in mind and remember that we need to make sure that these are options for people, but that we're not taking away something that they need. The in-person presence is still important.
Thank you. At PPIC, too, we study the broadband equity issue and the digital divide, and report on the legislation that was passed to try to all boats to rise on ensuring digital equity. And we continue to do reports on that. And I understand that in the remote world, we need to continue to focus more on that. Mm-hmm. Before I get into the audience questions, I wanted to give you this opportunity to say, what are one or two things that you wish more Californians knew about the third branch of government?
There are so many things that they should all want to know that they're about to go, right? But I wish they could all see all of the good work that the judges and justices, attorneys, staff, judicial assistants, all across the judicial branch do, and how dedicated and passionate they are about the work and serving the public. And I think that gets lost sometimes or not appreciated because you're focused on your case, and again, you're not always happy with the outcome. But there's so many people who give so much of their time and do it so well, and I'm blessed to be able to work with all of them.
Thank you. So I'm going to turn to audience questions. This one is, ensuring sufficient representation for individuals who have limited resources is an important goal and challenge for the judiciary. So that we're talking about the justice gap. What steps can the State Bar, the Judicial Council, and others take to ensure high-quality indigent representation?
And that is so important to me. And you talk about the justice gap, and we know from studies that there are 85% of people who do not access the courts, and that's because of cost issues that are associated with that. And so that should never be the case, that the courts are only accessible to a few. My experience in private practice taught me how important it is for lawyers and bar associations to give of their time. And someone at an event I was at yesterday said, to those who much is given, much is expected. I think that is true of our profession. And I think that we need to do a better job of committing to provide pro bono services. And I think we all can do that and all assist in different ways. The attorneys can do it by providing the actual services. We can do it through our self-help centers. We serve over 1 million people. I think we could do more. We have 125, but we could do more. And I think just as long as we're mindful of and never forget this need, that we're here to serve everybody. And there are ways, big and small, that we can all help with that issue.
Thank you. I know Stephen has a question that came in online.
Yeah, this is an audience question that came from Lance, who's here with us today. And the question is, as there are standards of conduct for all federal workers, to include the judiciary up to the appellate level, how soon would you predict that there will be a code of ethics for the members of the U.S. Supreme Court?
I heard someone say take the fifth, but I will say it's not my place to tell the federal judiciary what to do, but I will say that I'm proud of what California does. And I think it's so critical for everyone to see that not only do we have these rules, we embrace them. And it's so, again, critical to the public trust, confidence in the judiciary. We need to set the example. And so I'm glad that we do in California.
A survey by the State Bar of California a few years ago found that a large share of law students lose interest in entering public service as they progress through their legal education. Why do you think this is, and can anything be done to address it?
That is a great question, too. I mean, all of these questions are great, and they bring back thoughts of when I was in law school. And you mentioned public interest. I think it's so important to encourage people to pursue a path in public service. But you can do it at different times, I would say. So I know what it's like to graduate from law school with heavy debt. And to me, that was one of the reasons why I decided to go into private practice. There were a lot of reasons, but that was a not insignificant one. And I think that schools are doing a better job. Actually, my school did a good job of doing these sort of loan forgiveness programs. I think more can be done in that area with loan forgiveness programs, and encouraging people to do internships, externships, so they see. So again, being out in the community so that people are aware that these are viable options. And you can always go to private practice and then return to public service too.
Exactly. So this is more of a question that's a little bit futuristic, but happening now. Okay. That is, even though it's in its early stages, artificial intelligence, you knew this was coming, is already transforming all kinds of knowledge work. What kind of impact do you think it will have on law and the courts?
Well, I want to share a story that I had. I wish I had it here still. I probably have it somewhere in here. But I was asked this question recently, or a similar one, during the CJA and CLA. And the question was, how do I envision AI affecting the judicial branch? And I was at home with my kids the night before and thinking, why don't we ask ChatGPT? Like, I've never done this before. And so I asked that question. It was so easy to sign up for. And then I got back in seconds these detailed 10 bullets and a summary. And so when I was answering the question, I was like, I could go on about 10 topics in detail, but let me just give you the summary. I never said it was my answer. I said, let me just give you the summary. And then I gave the summary and then said it was from ChatGPT. I don't know. I wish I had it now. It was so on point. But I use that as an example of the instantaneous access to all this information. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? I think we're still going to have to figure that out. It's, as you said, an emerging issue. I'm not quite sure how it will impact the judicial branch. I again view it as an opportunity maybe to assist in access to justice, but I don't think it will ever replicate the work that we do. So I was speaking with students at UC Davis and saying, your jobs are secure. Hopefully that never comes back to haunt me, because they never can replicate the human touch, the empathy and judgment that is required for these positions. So I don't know what AI will bring. I find it fascinating. It was fun to try, but I have not used it to write any of my opinions, nor do I intend to, and nor do I recommend that you do that for your briefs.
It gave me an entire 6-paragraph poem on tofu. Any advice on people who want to attend law school?
Yes, do it. And it's a wonderful opportunity. I wish I could convince my sons, maybe I convince one of the two, to go to law school. I think no matter what you're interested in, for me, law school was, I always liked reading and writing, so if you do, it's a great place. but also just the interaction and being in an environment where it's learning from all of your classmates. I went to a school where I was blessed again to have wonderful classmates and wonderful teachers. No matter where you go, you'll be in a dynamic environment like that, where you'll be able to learn and use that education in meaningful ways that are really unlimited. So I wish I could go back and do it all different ways, because there are so many different paths that you can take. And I think having that legal education gives you that ability.
I agree. Also, my children are not interested. Stephen has a question.
So this one comes from David Carrillo at Berkeley Law. Right here. And he wanted to know who you would say is the greatest non-living California Chief Justice.
Non-living. Thank you, David.
Well, I might take the fifth on that one. It's hard for me, and when people ask questions like that, to me, I think of the institution of the Supreme Court. So it's hard for me to identify a favorite, and then also in what way, because there have been so many who have impacted our lives in so many different ways. If I were forced to give an answer here today, that if I could explain why, it would be Justice Reynoso as the first Latino to be on the Supreme Court. And I think that's meaningful to me for obvious reasons.
We have in the audience several fellows. You know, the Sac State puts on a tremendous fellows program, judicial fellows, assembly fellows, and Senate fellows, as well as executive fellows. Many are here, and the Judicial Council has some of its fellows here. So the advice, this is the question from TY. Do you have any advice for incoming assembly and beyond fellows?
Well, I would say that I have so much enjoyed meeting the fellows who came through, and what I think, again, it's one of those experiences where I gain more from it than you, and I come away inspired by the good work that you do. My advice for them would be to just continue to do what they're doing, exploring and talking to different people. I think really you should use this time to talk to everyone you have a chance to talk to. So any event that you're at, go, don't be shy. That can be hard for some of us, but don't be shy and introduce yourself. And I think the relationships that you build are equally important as the work and the knowledge that you're gaining. So I thank you for your work.
Good answer, thank you. Now this is also from the audience, I just say this because it's not from me. Public opinion ratings of the US Supreme Court are at historic lows, following some very controversial decisions, including on abortion rights. How can they recover the trust of the American people?
Again, I don't know that I can speak for them, but I think that the public needs to see public servants who are dedicated to doing their work, and especially judges, to be fair and impartial and true to the rule of law. And I think for all of us, that should be our guiding principles and what we aspire to. And again, explaining our decisions in a way that makes sense to the public. So I don't know what they can do, but I know what I can do. And that's what I have said and what my colleagues are always focused on, ensuring that we do the best jobs that are possible for the state of California.
Thank you. Stephen, you have another question online?
Yes, this is from our online audience as well. This is from Alex, who's with the Harvard Computational Policy Lab, and it sort of picks up on the earlier discussion around technology and access to the courts. And Alex's question is, I'm curious if the Judicial Council has plans to incorporate low-cost technical interventions that promise to improve access to justice, such as automated court date reminders sent via text message or other approaches along these lines.
Thank you for that question. The Judicial Council is exploring all of these different methods of technology, and so recently we have worked hard to include some of these issues in our technology strategic plan, and some of that includes pilot projects where we do have courts doing these reminders, and so those are things that we're actively exploring. Mm-hmm.
This is a question from a law student who's thinking to the future. What core values do you believe make a good judge?
Great question. I'm glad they're thinking to the future in the judicial branch. So I hope to meet that person someday at NJO. In terms of the core values, I think it depends also, I think, at what level. So trial court or appellate court, there are some differences. But I think, again, adherence to the rule of law, being fair and impartial, listening, I think is of critical importance. We don't know all of the answers, nor should we act like we do. And so I think it's important to give people the opportunity to present their cases and actively learn and be prepared. So, and again, I think this is true for judges across the different levels, is a good work ethic. Because this isn't easy work. You shouldn't go into being a judge because you think it'll be easier than what you're doing now. It's a lot of work. You should be dedicated to this role and be interested for the right reasons. And so I would say that there's some concern that I have when some people talk about being a judge and their motivating factors. And for me, it should always be ensuring that you're serving the public, and that's why we're here.
Thank you. The California Supreme Court has gained a reputation for a high level of collegiality and for often reaching consensus on opinions. How do you approach fostering a cooperative approach among the justices?
Well, this is probably a separate conversation that you and I should have at some
And not on a stage.
But we do have such a wonderful collegial court. I love working with every one of them, and it's a commitment and a culture, and it requires a commitment from each of the justices. And we all have it. We're all committed to helping one another. And I think that results in, it's a commitment that I also am focused on. So it's, I think, sometimes challenging and sometimes not. And you have certain cases where you all agree, and you have others where there's more discussion, more dialogue. But we do it in a collegial and collaborative and a civil way. And just to give you a little bit of insight for those who don't know, we have this very detailed process where we write back and forth what our views are on our colleague's circulated draft of an opinion. And they start off with very kind words like, "Thank you for your good, thoughtful work." But then we're like, okay, what's the bottom line? And then there's check boxes for concur, doubtful, disagree, and reservations. But you do it in a kind way. And that means so much, because these are people that you're working with closely, and you will for years. And so I think it's important to foster that collegiality, and I'm committed to that too.
I think the governors have done such a tremendous job of vetting such high-level people for that court. I fully agree. There have been times when we're talking about a case, and I have to turn to someone and say, "Are they disagreeing with me?" Because I really can't tell. It's such a soft letdown.
Yeah. Right. Takes a while to get used to.
It does. Stephen has another question from the audience.
Yeah, thank you. This comes from Caleb Kang, who's a student over at Jessup University in Rockland. And Caleb's question is, what is one important lesson that you've learned experientially through your work that you would share with a young professional?
That's a good question.
That's a great question. One lesson that I've learned I would share with a young person in particular, is how I interpret that, or how you said it. I would say the importance of being yourself and finding your own voice. I think that takes some time to get used to, and especially when you're a judge, there are so many people that I looked up to and were role models for me, and I just learned, well, you can't be that person, but you can take their best attributes and try to model them, but always be true to yourself and stay grounded and recognize who you are and where you come from. I think that's true not just for judges, but in law practice, I think that's true too. And across the board, wherever you're at.
That's a great question and a superb answer for us to end on. I want to say several things first. So much gratitude to the Chief Justice of California for taking time to be with us. Thank all of you for being here at PPIC at this event to make it such a success. Thank you to our sponsors who make this free lunch possible. And we're grateful for the work you do, grateful for the work of so many of you who are public servants. Thank you, and that concludes our program.